Hello everyone, my name is Pillar and I'm going to be giving the judge briefings for Princeton IV. So before we start, I'm going to show you who's actually part of the CAP, the CA team. This is us. We're going to be the ones who have created the motions and who are going to give clarification to the motions. It's nice to just have a picture behind the names that you will see on Discord. So this is us. Now let's just start with the judge briefings. A couple of pragmatic things. You have 50 minutes to deliberate after the debate. This includes giving speaker points. So try to finish up at like minute 13 and then have 2 minutes, for example, for speaker points or how long you think will be adequate for it. But you should take that into account when you're having this deliberation. After that, you have a 15-minute oral adjudication or 15-minute OA in which you can give explanations towards teams of the call, what the call was, what the results was, how everyone did. The chair's responsibility in this context is to lead and direct the discussion. And this also means that you should include everyone. So you should include trainees or you should include everyone in the panel, make sure that they have had their say in things or have had the opportunity to speak up. What you should also do is you should call a vote when you're unable to come to a unanimous decision, when you don't have that much time anymore, or when you're running around in circles and no one is really listening to each other. You should just call a vote. And if, for example, there's a 2-2 vote for one team in favor of the other, then the team that you vote on is going to be the one who's going to win that clash. So you are the tiebreaker in an even vote. If you are a panelist, the idea is that you should succinctly and directly respond to chair questions, maybe raise some questions about either the debate, or what someone has said, or what has happened in the debate, but try to focus on what actually is asked by the chair. If there's going to be a vote, as previously explained, then you can vote on a team, and that will be taken into account. If you are a trainee, you're basically the exact same as a panelist, so you still should be taking part of the discussion. You should be part of the deliberation, raise points, and be given the floor. But you're not allowed to vote, which means that when the vote's being called, then you can't cast a vote. When you're going to decide on speaker points, they should be set in accordance with the placings. So the team who's in first should have the highest total number of speaker points. You're not allowed to have low point wins. Okay, wasn't important for judging. What you should do is you should not count arguments. Just because someone says more arguments does not mean that team wins. It might be that one team actually explains something in more detail and therefore just is more believable, has a bigger impact, and therefore can take it over. It also means that, for example, just because closing governments is something similar to opening governments doesn't mean they necessarily, again, lose under them, because there might be different levels of details on this. And even if there might be a lack of explicit weighing, that shouldn't be just discredited. You should look at the analysis as given and then see if something is good or bad, or like better or worse. What we also do not do is don't give separate scores for style, sophistication, originality, etc. It only matters insofar as a greater style or a greater illustration makes the point across come better, but you don't give you don't give separate speaks like +5, -5 as WSDC does sometimes. Judges should insist teams engage with each other's argument as much as possible. What's important to note is that there's no absolute duty to hit every point from the other side, but major claims that do go unchallenged should be counted as accepted or conceded by the team that had the opportunity to respond. So again, just because someone takes 5 arguments and someone deals with the most important 3, that is sufficient. Because again, if the other points aren't proven and the core points aren't discussed, then this is enough engagement. You don't need to hit every single argument. Also, what is important is interactions might be non-explicit, so they can say, we're going to rebut OG in these and these ways. But there are also oftentimes implicit ways in which things react to each other. So if you have a completely different framing of the world or how it illustrates, then this might mean that the other cases which another team is talking about happen less. So if they explain why their view of the world is actually better and do this in a better way than other teams, then this is implicitly responding to the arguments made by the other teams. You should be able to follow the debate. And the idea is that it's not just important to note flaws in arguments or strengths in arguments, but it's always comparative flaws and strengths in arguments. So it might be the case that a team is bad, but another team is worse, and therefore the bad team still takes it over the worst team. Also important to note is there's no automatic fourth. Just because opening government doesn't bring a model, that means that they're fourth. Just because a closing team does not do any weighing against their open team, doesn't mean that they immediately are fourth or under their bench. Take it into account. Just look at what happens in debate and try to assess that. So one of the things that you need to note is that it's not just that teams will disagree on what's true, but also on what is relevant and the most important thing. The kind of way that you go about this is try to intervene the least amount as possible, because you are just a judge and it's kind of like unfair that you like what you think is important should be dictated because people don't always know what you think. So if teams already agree on what is important, then you should judge debate on that. So if everyone agrees that saving more lives is important, then if you believe that quality of life is actually more important, that shouldn't matter. Also, it might be the case that implicitly teams agree with what's important. So if an impact lead, like all impacts in the end lead to more or less people get saved, even if no one explicitly says this is the most important thing in debate, you can see that people apparently, like for example, opening half, implicitly agree that something is important. On that side, you should also consider sometimes people don't explicitly or implicitly agree. Then you should just think about who's giving me the most like best reasoning for why something is important. You should consider this even if again you disagree. Just to judge the debate as it happened. If for some reason 1 and 3 doesn't apply, then the best thing to do is try to see still comparative strengths. So maybe it's true that no one really explains why something is the most relevant thing, but you might still believe that someone has better argumentation for why something is true and overall impacting of something, which means that overall the arguments are still stronger, they're more likely to happen, all that kind of stuff. And therefore you can still give it to another team. But it's important that you are now intervening because again, no one is being explicit. And there will be cases where maybe one team is stronger in impacting, but the other one is stronger in explaining why something is true. And then you just need to discuss or need to think about what is like more important. That's subjective. Some people will say impacting, some people will say something is true. And when you disagree here, you can't come to a unanimous call. It is very fair to actually call a vote. So don't just call a vote because you're running out of time or because you're running in circles, but also maybe because it's just fair to have the discussion. It's just different perceptions of what is important. So from what kind of base should you judge? You should judge as the average intelligent voter. So you're not from any specific country, you're not from any specific profession, religious beliefs, political beliefs. You're neither left wing nor right wing, not progressive nor conservative. You're not any specific belief. It's also important that you should be willing to be persuaded. So just because someone brings an argument that might not be the strongest argument in your opinion, or not the most relevant, or like the most relevant one that you would have brought otherwise, doesn't mean that the argument isn't explained and isn't something that is winning the debate. So you should be willing to be persuaded by these arguments. And as I stated before, you should try to intervene as little as possible. Just assess the claims as they are in the debate. Does someone rebut this? Is this something that is like controversial in debate? Is this not? Just discuss the debate as this happened. In terms of views and knowledge, you should know that you still know the rules of the BP debate, even though the average informed voter might not know it. That also means that when a rule is broken, then you should just remove the advantage and not separately punish the person. So, for example, at the moment that someone brings a new argument in whip, that doesn't mean that you should. What it means is you should just disregard the argument and then judge that whip as it has happened. You don't discredit the whole speech. You don't just directly talk a specific amount of speaker points. It's you just take away the advantage and then judge it as it is. You should also be able to understand complex concepts and things if they are explained in debate. So maybe the average intelligent voter doesn't necessarily know that much about economics, but if these are explained logically and they're explained in a debate, you should be able to follow them. Okay, now coming to the OA. You only have 15 minutes for this OA. So normally this is given by chairs, but if there might be a split decision where the chair was in the minority, then the chair can choose a panelist who then needs to give the OA or a specific part of the OA. So maybe opening halves where you disagree, then that person does opening half. What you should do is you should contain specific metrics of weighing. So you say, I think that team X wins over Y because these and these reasons of this specific metric I think is important on how you save more lives. And then you explain where the metric comes from. Is this metric explained by the teams? Is this something that everyone implicitly agrees on? And then you just give some comparative justifications of these placings. Again, you don't just discuss this team is bad, they made these flaws. It is this team's made these flaws, this other team's made these flaws. There are less flaws in this speech and that speech, and therefore they take it over in this form, as a broad example. And you can maybe give some advice for improvement. What you should not do is you should not give detailed feedback to each speaker or each team, because you have time to do that later, and it should not be part of the OA. It's also important that you as a judge submit feedback on other judges. So if you are a panelist on your chair, and if you are a chair on your panelist, and you should submit the ballots before the OA starts. Okay, now tag policy and PYs. So when there is a missing person, if there's a missing panelist or trainee, you should tag them into someone is missing channel. And the idea is to already do this before the end of prep time. So if 1 or 2 minutes before the end of prep time, someone still isn't there, you should tag them to make sure they are there before the end of prep time. If they're still not there after the end of prep time and like you have made it 2 minutes, then you can start the debate, and then you should notify the tab that they haven't shown up. If there's a missing chair, then judges or teams should tag someone in the so there's missing channel, again, preferably before the end of prep time. And then you have to wait for a new chair to arrive, or maybe we appoint one of the panelists as a chair. Again, we need to have a chair for debate to start, so you do need to wait at this context. If teams, again, similarly for chairs, if teams have not joined before the end of prep time, you should tag them in the same channel to make sure they enter, because we want to have this tournament be run on time, because people are from different time zones. I want to make sure they're able to go to bed at somewhat of a reasonable time. Another thing that's important besides this tag policy is PYs. PYs are very important for engagement. So if a speaker does not take a PY, you should remind speakers after the speech that they should take and offer PYs. And if they don't take the PY, you should directly lower their speaker points. And you should flip in close comparisons, as teams might have had the opportunity to interact. And therefore, this is something that you should take into account, because engagement is something that repetitive. And this, of course, does not apply when the speaker requests a PY, but actually doesn't get any. Then they've given the opportunity to do so. Again, be reasonable here. If a person does this at minute 2, and then they don't take, no one gives a PY, and then they don't take a PY at minute 5, then they again had the opportunity to engage. So then you should not grant this. So these were the judge briefings. If you have any questions, please let us know in the Discord, and then hope to see you soon at Princeton. Cheers.